Welcome back to Wreaths by Marguerite. I'm Marguerite. Today's tutorial is going to be for this wreath here that is going to go for sale in the Etsy shop. It will not be a kit, but what I'm going to be doing going forward is I'm going to do one kit a week where you can buy the product and make it yourself, and do one kit where I'm making a product for my shop and you can purchase the finished wreath. Primarily what I produce are what are called storm door wreaths, and that's what the tutorials and the kits are for. This is an example of a storm door wreath. It's also called a pancake wreath. It's also called a thin wreath. It's designed to still have that fullness and look like you see in front of you, but it's under 4 inches deep, so it will fit behind a screen or a storm door up against your regular door. You get about 4 inches of space between the doors when you have a screen or a storm door up against your regular door. And this particular piece comes in at 3.5 with the ribbon really fluffed out like it is right now. If I were to flatten out the ribbon more, it'd be 3 inches. But that makes the design feasible for putting behind those doors without getting crushed, versus a traditional wreath that tend to be between 7 and 12 inches deep if you have a bow on them. Now this design still has a ton of ribbon on it. It just doesn't have a big bow, which makes it bulkier and just crushes behind those doors. So that's not ideal. If you want something like that, you're going to want to put it outside of the screen or storm door, and you're going to want to have a much more protected entryway. Otherwise, my suggestion for something like that is to do in the house. I have the big, beautiful, fluffy masterpieces inside the house for me to enjoy, and then I have these really adorable storm door wreaths outside on the door that are protected. I live in an area in southwest Nebraska where we get a ton of wind, a fair amount of snow, and being able to use this outside still allows me to decorate for the neighborhood to see, but it also protects it from the elements. So let's get started on making this wreath today. Okay. Like I said before, this is not a wreath that will be for sale on a tutorial. This will be a wreath available in the Etsy shop. Once a week I will be doing a tutorial where you can purchase the kit going forward, and one of the tutorials will be for an item that I'm making for the shop. When I'm making an item for the shop, it will be done in a much quicker fashion with all of the little things done ahead of time. But it's more to give you an idea of the process. When I actually do this in a tutorial, I break it down to the absolute lowest common denominator so that you're seeing every single solitary portion of the process happening. But just for the sake of that, when you do purchase a kit and go back to watch a tutorial to match it or another tutorial, you'll get written direction on how to assemble your wreath and a thank you card. In your kit, it varies a little, but everybody gets a wreath frame that's 14 inches with the 4 rows of wire rings with the 6 crossbars. That's all a must in order for this to work properly for this particular design. Your pipe cleaners will be attached. There's 12 of them on the wreath frame, 6 where the crossbars are connected to the outer 2 rings, and then 6 in between the crossbars on the inner 2 rings. So ring 1 and 2 have 6, ring 3 and 4 have 6. Okay. In this particular wreath, we don't have extra pipe cleaners because the sign attaches right to the frame, because there are pre-drilled holes both in the top and the bottom on this metal sign. You will receive a sign, wood or metal. In this case, it's a 12-inch metal on this wreath. You'll receive 2 to 3 sets of ribbon bundles. In this case, there's 3. These 2 are 1.5 inch wide, and this is 2.5 inches wide. You'll have an assortment. It can be 2 2.5 inch ribbons, or 3 2.5 inch ribbons, or 3 1.5 inch ribbons, or any combination thereof. And they're all going to be folded in the bundles when you purchase a kit in 12-inch lengths, because that's the length that each of these ribbon tails are. This is going to be the combination for this design to match the sign here. Let me fold these back up for later. I've already pre-cut the dovetails, which is the triangle at the top. In all 12 bundles, you've got 12 twist ties, so you need 12 bundles of ribbon. I'm going to set that to the side now. And then, of course, your solid foundation to any of these storm door style wreaths, or most wreaths, are deco mesh. In this case, it's a blue, I don't know, it's a check, sort of. It's check and stripe both. So they're 12 inches, no, 20 inches long this way by 10 inches this way. And there are 12 of them that are needed for your wreath. I usually put a couple extra pieces of ribbon and mesh in your kit so that if you have an oops moment, you are covered. Last thing you want to do is to be without enough supplies. The next thing that's important is knowing what tools you need, which is also on the paperwork you receive. You're going to need to use a ruler unless you have one of these cutting mats. This is for cutting the mesh as well as measuring. You're going to need a chip clip or some sort of clip to hold onto your mesh. You'll see what we need this for in a moment. A good pair of scissors that you only use for ribbon and crafting and nothing else because they need to be sharp. I use a Fiskar brand. Some cutters. A wooden dowel that's fairly thin, or a pencil or a pen for twisting the pipe cleaner. We don't need it on this wreath, but I use a plastic embroidery needle that I purchased from Walmart to pull the pipe cleaners on the back of the wooden signs through this mesh when I'm at the point to put the sign on. If you watch some of the other tutorials, you'll see how this is functioning in that process. Okay, so let's get started. When you're working on one of these wreaths, you start with the outside ring and you want the pipe cleaner that you're working with to be horizontal towards you. Move that sign out of the way because we're not going to need it till later. I don't know if it's because I'm left-handed or not. I've said this before, but I turn it a little bit to the side. That's how I work best with the wreath form. But try doing it where you're straight on. That helps you keep from twisting and turning too much. Less strain on the body, make the wreath work for you. So we're going to start by putting the first 6 pieces of deco mesh on the outside ring. This is a more thin mesh. You can see through it pretty well versus some of the other meshes that I use, but it should still hide this wreath frame perfectly once all of it's on and all the ribbons on and the signs on. If it doesn't, you can always do 2 layers of the mesh in either the bottom or the top layer. Add 6 more poofs to hide it better, but I really don't think that that's necessary in most cases unless it's super, super thin mesh. So we take our ruler and we lay it on the mesh, and this is a 10-inch mesh, so we want to find our center, and that's where the clip comes in. At 5 inches, I clip it, I turn it around, and it comes off. Let's try that again. I find that until I get into a groove, I'm a little bit clumsy. That's okay. Just shows you we all have those moments. And also, see how it's curling under? You want to make sure that the curl side is down whenever you use this. Excuse me. Take the ruler again, find 5 inches, and we're going to just ruffle it up in our thumbs. I do it like this. I find that it works perfectly for me. Up to the clip. And we want basically a circle of the mesh. And then we're going to take the mesh vertically into the horizontal pipe cleaners. Get a hold. See, it's the first one, so everything's going to be clumsy. Tight and low 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Put it up and out of the way. Take the outside cut edge on one side over the inside cut edge. Take the outside cut edge on the other side over the inside cut edge. And make sure it's a circle. And then holding the pipe cleaners. If you have to make any adjustments, you grab from the center, never from the outside of the mesh. Get that Our goal is to make sure the outside edge is circular. This knot is not as crucial, but you still want to try to do that. It helps it lay better. I always skip one and go to the next. Taking the next piece of mesh, curl side down, find my center, clip at 5, turn it around, find my center and gather. In the tutorials, go through every one of these super quick, not super quick, super slow, explaining everything that I'm doing so that you have plenty of direction so that you're not confused at any point. Where today I had everything completely cut, completely prepped, so that we go about it a little quicker, since this is just for a wreath for my shop on Etsy. My wreath shop on Etsy is where you buy all of the kits. Where's the end? There it is. That we offer, along with all the pre-made stuff. All of that information will be in the description of the video. Now the next 3 pieces of mesh, I'm going to gather without the clip on one end. No, the clip's going to be on there, but I won't measure the other end. The reason I'm going to do it that way is to show you that you don't have to do that once you get comfortable, especially when you have a mesh that has a pattern. This has a pattern, so I can follow the pattern when I am gathering up the mesh rather than whipping out I don't like that. Let me fix that. It's bugging me. All right. Then whipping out the ruler. But I can also, since I have this cutting mat, use the lines on the cutting mat to keep me straight as well. Something to consider. I use a 36 by 24 inch mat because that's the biggest I've found. See how there's a panel in the center? So I don't need to use the ruler. I just need to try to stay as close to the center in between these 2 pieces of tinsel in the mesh. And I often end up doing the one hand gathering technique like I'm doing now rather than 2. But I'll go back and forth during this video to show you both ways. I just find, for me, that one hand gathering and one hand holding the mesh towards the top is the most effective and speediest technique for me, especially when I'm making multiples. You'll find that every once in a while you get a piece of frayed mesh pop up, and that's normal. There's no such thing as mesh not fraying, but I will tell you that the less you handle it, the less likely you're going to get it frayed. So curl side down, clip that center, flip it around. Of course, we still curl side down. Gather up the center. I'm going to use 2 hands this time. It's just more comfortable for me as well to do it the other way, where I hold my hand up here. But you're gathering it into your thumb and your index finger either way. Get that clip off. Make sure you're a nice circle by holding it loosely. Get that in there. We're making sure that the pipe cleaner is twisted tight and low because the design of this wreath is what's called the storm door wreath, like we've talked about before. And the idea is to keep this wreath under the 4 inches of space that you have between a storm or screen door and your regular door, okay? If that is not a concern for where you're placing the wreath, then by all means you don't have to make sure that everything's as short and low. Get that clip at 5 inches. By all means, go check out some of the other videos where I give a much more detailed direction if you want to do this on your own. But I have kits in my Etsy shop for all of the wreaths that I made that were not just wreaths for my shop. You'll see me do orders online here. I'll do kits. At some point, I will make wreath bows to match some, not all, of the wreath kit designs. If there is a wreath kit that you want to purchase but you do want a bow for it, reach out to me and message me and we could probably work that out. In most cases I have extra materials, not always, but in most cases we do. I will remind you that if you put a bow on it, it's not going to be a storm door wreath any longer. You can still put them there, but your bow more than likely is going to end up smushed. Okay, so we have the first layer of mesh on. You can barely see the wire now, which is good. So we're going to put in the first 6 bundles of ribbon. And just real quick, they're folded in half. I talk about all that in the more detailed tutorials. Layered with my favorite ribbon on the top. I went with the ribbon that most closely matched the sign on top. And I gather it where it's creased, create an inverted V. And that's so that the ribbon is more likely to stay on the outside of the wreath because we want all the ribbon to go out here so it can be seen. Because this layer is going to be covered by the top layer. So that helps it stay outwards. Granted, it has a mind of its own. So it's going to creep back up. So every so often you're going to have to either pull it back out or do like I do and wait to the end when you're fluffing the top level of the ribbon. Go back and pull the ribbon back out to be seen. And again, I do every other. I find that doing every other helps the wreath lay flatter, number 1. And number 2, it's got a more consistent pattern, which is more pleasing to the eye. But these, as I always say, are just really simple, basic guidelines. You can adjust them to your personal preferences, what works best for you. Because if you notice, like I said, I have the wreath angled a little bit, not straight in front of me. I just find that that's a more comfortable position for me to be in when I'm creating this. And we're having fun, so we don't want to be uncomfortable, right? Right. And it looks like blue is going to be popular this year. This particular collection and sign has been selling like crazy everywhere to makers. So I would advise if you're a maker, get in on the trend. This is just beautiful. For me, it reminds me of the blue Corelle ware that my mother had growing up. My mother would have loved this wreath. She loved all things blue. Me, if you haven't figured out already, I'm someone who desperately loves purple. But different strokes, right? Okay. So what I just did with the pipe cleaner was I tucked it in towards the center of the wreath so that it's not anywhere that it can scratch you, your door. It's part of the mechanics that you don't really want to see, okay? And now I'm going to go back and do the other 3 bundles for this layer. Invert that so we can keep the ribbon outbound on the wreath. See what I mean? It's a thinner mesh, but it's already being covered up quite a bit. We twist that till we get about a 1-inch twist and cut off the excess. Make sure you have a trash can nearby. It's always helpful to manage the mess that way. I don't know about anybody else, but things start to feel chaotic when things get messy when I'm working. Makes it harder for me to focus. Okay, 2 more on this layer. And it's the opposite on the ribbon that it was on the mesh. On the mesh, you wanted your pipe cleaners horizontal and you put your mesh in vertical. In the case of the ribbon, your ribbon is horizontal and your pipe cleaners are vertical. So you're switching back and forth. Because we want this ribbon to be seen as much as possible on the bottom layer. I would recommend getting a good pair of clippers. I just got these for the classes that I do in person. Yes, I do classes in person as well as craft shows, Etsy, this channel, kits. Gotta do all the things, right? Trying to get as much of this out to the people as possible. Okay. And I thank you again for being here with me today and watching me make this wreath for the shop. We have all sorts of goodies in there, from all the holidays to essential everyday heroes, the military, summer, special things like cancer awareness, autism awareness, Mardi Gras, and lots of everyday designs, so that if you're not someone who decorates for every holiday, there's choices in there for you to keep up every day of the year. Or if you do decorate for holidays, there are some times that are kind of questionable as to what holiday should I be putting up. You can just stick that up there. I started adding some winter and some New Year's this year, so that time of the year when our doors aren't naked. It's nice to have something on the door, because the winter months tend to be a little bit depressing. So we want to perk up our doors, right? All right, so the first layer is done. We're going to go back in and we're going to do the second and final layer of mesh. I'm going to go ahead and pre-place my pipe cleaners horizontally so I don't forget and end up with mesh in my hand and not prepared. And then we're going to go in and put our next 6 pieces of mesh. Okay, get that. I also recommend that when you're using this mesh that you wear something short sleeve, because mesh is like Velcro and it sticks to everything. So yeah, don't wear good clothes when you're making a wreath with mesh, because it's going to stick to you, it's going to stick to itself, it's going to stick to the ribbon. The good part about that is when you are, see, now I'm going to go the other way. I mix it up all the time so it doesn't become boring. Not that this is boring, it's fun. But yeah, that's the other reason why I do 3 and then I go back and do the other 3 on each layer. That way it sticks to itself and it's less likely to move. The mesh, that is. The ribbon, I just do that because it gives it dimension, I believe. So we're turning that mesh, curl side down, clipping it at 5 inches because that's the center, gathering it up. The center, gather it, make sure we have a good circle loosely in our thumb and forefinger. I did that one. Now it's time to do this one. See how I turn it at an angle a little bit? Just less tension on your arm. Outside cut edge over the inside cut edge. And I say that every single time I put a piece of mesh in the wreath in the tutorials that I do, because it's so important, and because when you're putting the outside cut edge over the inside cut edge, you're covering the cut edges, which are where it's going to fray, if it's going to fray at all. And that protects it and keeps it away from the outside edge of the wreath. So it's so much more less likely to get caught on anything. And that's why I would recommend too that you have at least 3 feet of workspace when you're doing a project like this, because I could show you some pictures and make you laugh of how I have a bunch of stuff on my work table and I'm trying to put a wreath together and everything on the table ends up getting involved in the project. Gets stuck to the mesh. Yeah, you don't want to do that. It complicates things, it slows you down, and it can end up damaging your product, and you don't want to do that. Don't want to waste any product. Okay? I love this blue. It's so pretty. This particular wreath so reminds me of my mother. Let's see. Curl side down, 5 inches, measure it, clip it, turn it around. I would recommend a clip that has a good grip on it. I think I'm going to change to a different clip because this one just doesn't seem to hold as well as it used to. I guess I've worn it out. When you're gathering, it's important to make as small as gathers as possible. If you're making this for a storm door, to help keep it as low in the wreath as possible. Just love this blue. Outside cut edge over inside cut edge. Also, if there's some design that you would like to see me make, please comment below. I had a comment the other day by a lady that wanted to know about a sunflower wreath using 6-inch burlap. I have not done that, but I've thought about it a little bit. And like I told her, I think she needs to use an 8 or a 10-inch ring versus a 14-inch wreath. I have done a ruffled wreath. There is one on my Etsy page right now that's St. Patrick's Day. That might work. That ruffle style might work for her. So if you're watching, check out that wreath and let me know what you think. If so, I could probably think of how to make that work. But I'm thinking if you're using 6-inch burlap, it's not wired, it's not mesh, but you need to do the ruffle method. And if you used a 14-inch wreath, I would imagine that you would want to use a 14-inch with four rings on it and do 2 rows of the ruffle, and then buy a styrofoam sunflower center that they sell at a lot of places. I can recommend to put in the center if you want it to look like a sunflower. The other option is Unique in the Creek makes boards for different sunflower and other flower designs. Check them out. They're a fellow wreath making community that's been around, has a bunch of really awesome ideas. Lori and Michelle have some amazing ideas. This is the last one, so I'm doing it the way I do it in the tutorial. When you get the step-by-step instructions. And in the tutorials I do for The kits, you get this overhead view as well, so that you can really watch the details over and over and over, so you're sure you're getting it right. Don't let it intimidate you. If you put something in and you don't like how it looks, you can take it out and put it back in. I just don't recommend handling the mesh too much. Practice on one piece a few times if you want to make sure before you put it in, since I give you an extra piece in there. Let's see, does that look round? Not even close. So I'm grabbing it, not at the edge. And the reason you don't grab it on the outside edge is because it'll change the pattern. You don't want to do that. So, all right, so there we go. When you're putting your signs on, usually with the wood signs, you're taking pipe cleaners down through the mesh. But in the case of this metal sign, since it has a hole at the top and at the bottom, you just use the existing pipe cleaners and put the pipe cleaner through the top hole that would be in the position of 12 o'clock on a clock. So that's 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So you're gonna twist that a couple times. And then you're gonna take the one that would be positioned at 6 o'clock to put in the bottom hole. You don't wanna make it too tight. I need to loosen that up because it's causing the sign to bow. You don't want your sign to bow. That's not a pretty look. I'm gonna loosen it up just a touch. There we go. Okay, so your sign's in there. I'm gonna sit back down. You may or may not find, at least in my case, I'm up and I'm down and I'm up and I'm down when I'm making my projects. So now, all the tools that we need left to use is the dowel, and I'll show you that once we get all the ribbon in on the top layer. And on the top layer, in most cases, I don't do the inverted V with the ribbon. I put it in diagonally with the pipe cleaners vertically, twist it 3 times, and then I just lift and separate, and I put a little curl in the ribbon and pop that bubble that occurs at the center down here from gathering the ribbon. I do one at a time. And then, like I said, I turn it to make it as easy as possible for me to work with the product. In this case, the ribbon. Okay. You can do the inverted V to cover more of the mesh if that's something that you like. And I do this one and this one. I put the ribbon in here and here, and then here and here, and then the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock last because I like the ribbon bundles to sit on top of the side bundles. Okay, it's just personal preference, and I think it adds to the beauty. You can do it in whatever fashion that you want, that you're most comfortable with. Now, in every other bundle of ribbon tails that I put in the wreath, I'm going to put the blue based background wreath ribbon here, and then in here it's going to be on the outside, it's going to be flipped. You'll see that in just a second. Again, that's just about giving it some dimension. So here's the bottom center. So in this case, I'm going to take the ribbon here that was in the center to the outside edge instead of the inside edge. Hopefully that makes sense to you. You can do all 3 at once or one at a time, which is probably the smarter thing to do. When I'm at a show and I'm in a hurry and I'm fluffing wreaths, I tend to do all 3 at once, I won't lie. But we've got plenty of time here. See? These 2 are inside, this one's outside. I'm gonna turn it around so it's comfortable for me. Put my next bundle, where is that? It's hiding. Gather it up the center. See, now this one's gonna lay over and the light blue background will go out where it was in there. Get that nice and curled. Out, in, and I'm just gonna there we go. So see how it's sitting on top of this? Every other bundle is sitting on top of the bundle next to it. Hopefully that helps it make more sense to you now. I'm sure you're like, what are you talking about? 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock. You know, on a clock. You have a 12 o'clock and a 6 o'clock. That's the top and the bottom. Pop those bubbles out. You can also use the dowel to curl your ribbon. I'll show you that on these three. Try to get the bubbles out, okay? Get them in place. All right, you just take the dowel behind the ribbon and then just use your hand over the top. Look at that curl. Look at that curl. See what I'm saying? Oh, this is the last one. For a second, I thought I was missing one. Oops. I thought I still had one more. Put that in there. Okay. So now this was on the inside. This is going to be on the outside. I love this wreath. Oh, man. It screams my mom. I swear it does. Well, I don't swear, but you know what I mean. This just totally looks like what my mom would have loved. All right, let me see. Okay, so now we go back with the dowel. And you can buy little buttons with the shank on the back to enhance this point to hide the pipe cleaner mechanics. Or you can twist it totally up and hide the stub behind this ribbon. But in this case, I'm going to do what I consider my favorite, which is our curly cues or piggy tails, if you call them that. You're just wrapping it around the dowel till it gets to the base to give it some dimension. You can pull them out so that you see the little curly cue, or you can settle it down in. I'm going to settle it down in. I'm going to do that on all of these. See how it looks. And then once this is done, we go back and make sure all of the ribbon is symmetrical, facing the right directions, nice and curled. All the ribbon on the bottom layer is pulled out so you can see it too. That's 3. Got 3 to go. Three to go. See, when you break it down into simple steps that way, it truly is a simple project that you can do. And the way I break down the steps when I talk about it in the more detailed tutorial, as a reminder, the other nice thing about this technique is if you can't complete it in one sitting and you have to walk away, it's easy to pick up where you left off because it's so simple. You cut all your ribbon at the same time and make your bundles so that everything's just a, you know, series of repetitive motion. So now I'm going to start with the bottom and I'm going to make sure all my ribbon is facing out to the edge as I can possibly do, because we want to see as much of this beautiful ribbon as we can. And it's important to know that I only use wired ribbon in these wreaths that I make in the kits that I put together. All my product uses wired ribbon for a lot of reasons, but basically you have much more control over the ribbon that has wire in it. Without wire in it, it just goes wherever it wants. You can use unwired ribbon in bows, but I would not recommend using wired ribbon in a project like this. It's not going to stay where you want it to, and you'll be frustrated. And I don't want to hear that anybody's frustrated. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and make sure all my ribbon is where I want it to be and curled how I want it to be curled. Standing up helps. I'm giving this a little more curl than you would have if you were putting it on a storm door, just to show you how much dimension you can get. Or if you're putting it on a storm door, you would just bring it out and leave it as flat as possible so that you could see all the ribbon without it getting scrunched up in your door. Did I do that one? I think I did. I did. All right, let me take a look at that. All right. Get this all set. And there you have it. Not too bad, right? All right, well, here we are. It's finished. Remember that this is only one wreath that will be available in the Etsy shop. It is the tutorial for this week that is just for a piece of product going into the shop. Remember that we'll have one tutorial for kits that you can purchase and one tutorial for a single wreath that will be available in the shop. All the information you need for ordering the kits and the wreaths will be listed down in the description here. And if it wouldn't be too much to ask, I'd love it if you followed me on Facebook. Same name, Wreaths by Marguerite. Also, like and subscribe my YouTube channel. There'll be a lot more content coming. Go ahead and take a look at the other things. Comment, share. Appreciate any support you can provide. Also, before I forget, don't forget, if I have the extra supplies, I can make you a bow to go on this wreath if you want to put it somewhere other than the front door or any other wreaths I have. If I still have enough of the product left over to make a bow, we can arrange for you to purchase a bow at an additional price to go with it, and then I can pack it with the kit or the wreath, depending on how we figure out how you want to do it. Just leave me comments, send me messages, and I'll be happy to help. I'm looking forward to more tutorials and the comments and the subscribers. Everybody have a great day.